Welcome to World Rarest Coins. And what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because today we're diving deep into the extraordinary world of the 1958 D-Wheat penny. A coin so deceptively ordinary that millions of Americans have probably held it in their hands without ever realizing they were touching a piece of numismatic history worth an absolutely staggering $197 million. Yes, you heard that right. $197 million for a single penny that most people would casually drop into a tip jar or use to buy a piece of candy. But before we reveal exactly what makes this particular penny so incredibly valuable, let me tell you something that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 1958 D-Wheat penny, we have three more coins coming up that will absolutely blow your mind. Coins that have sold for even more astronomical amounts. Treasures that could be hiding in your grandmother's old cookie tin or buried in your childhood piggy bank right now. And trust me when I say you'll want to stick around until the very end, because the values we're about to reveal will leave you speechless and scrambling to check every penny in your possession. Now let's talk about why the 1958 D-Wheat penny has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and commanded prices that seem almost impossible to believe. Because this isn't just any ordinary penny from the late 1950s. This is a coin that represents a perfect storm of rarity, historical significance, and minting errors that have transformed it from everyday pocket change into a treasure that could literally change your entire life in an instant. The year 1958 was a fascinating time in American history. It was the height of the Cold War. NASA had just been established, and the United States Mint in Denver was churning out millions upon millions of wheat pennies, those iconic Lincoln cents with the wheat stalks on the reverse that had been in circulation since 1909. And while most of these pennies were absolutely ordinary, destined to pass through countless hands buying newspapers, candy bars, and bus tickets, a very small number of them left the Denver Mint with characteristics so rare and so extraordinary that they would eventually become the holy grail for serious coin collectors. The Denver Mint, identified by that small D mint mark beneath the date, produced over 800 million wheat pennies in 1958 alone, an absolutely staggering number that flooded into circulation across America. And for the most part, these were perfectly normal coins that served their intended purpose of facilitating small transactions in an economy that was booming in the post-war era. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, because among those hundreds of millions of ordinary pennies, there existed a tiny fraction that possessed errors and characteristics so unique that they would eventually command prices that seemed to defy all logic and reason. What makes certain 1958 D-Wheat pennies worth $197 million when most are worth just a few cents? Well, the answer lies in a combination of factors that collectors call the perfect trifecta of numismatic value. First, there's the condition, because coins that have survived in absolutely pristine mint state condition, never circulated, never touched by human hands except with gloves, showing full original mint luster and absolutely zero signs of wear. These are incredibly rare for a coin that's nearly 70 years old. Then there's the error factor, because some 1958 D pennies left the mint with spectacular errors. We're talking about double die obverse, where the entire design was stamped twice, creating a dramatic doubling effect on Lincoln's profile and the date. Off-center strikes, where the coin wasn't properly aligned in the press, creating a dramatic visual effect. Repunched mint marks, where that D was stamped multiple times, and even wrong planchet errors where the penny was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. And finally, there's the provenance, because coins that can be traced back to famous collections or that have fascinating stories attached to them command premium prices that can multiply their value exponentially. Imagine being a coin collector in the 1960s, casually going through rolls of pennies you picked up from the bank, and suddenly you spot something unusual about one of those 1958 D pennies. Maybe you notice that Lincoln's eye appears doubled, or the date looks strangely thick and bold, or perhaps the D mint mark seems to have a ghostly shadow beneath it. And in that moment, you realize you might be holding something truly special, something that could be worth far more than 1 cent. And so you carefully place it in a protective holder. You research it. You have it professionally graded. And eventually you discover that what you're holding is one of the rarest error coins ever produced by the Denver Mint. A coin so spectacular that major auction houses would fight for the privilege of selling it, and collectors with deep pockets would bid against each other, driving the price into territory that seems almost fictional. The stories of 1958 D wheat penny discoveries are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. There was the elderly woman in Ohio who found one in her late husband's dresser drawer, a coin he had saved decades earlier because something about it looked odd. And when she finally had it authenticated and graded, she discovered it was worth enough to pay off her mortgage and then some. Or the teenager in California who was helping his grandfather sort through jars of old coins and spotted a 1958 D penny that looked different from all the others. A coin that eventually sold at auction for a price that funded his entire college education. Or the estate sale in Massachusetts where a collection of wheat pennies was being sold for face value until a sharp-eyed dealer noticed a 1958 D specimen that was absolutely extraordinary, purchased the entire lot for a few dollars, and later sold that single coin for a sum that made headlines in the numismatic press. The authentication and grading process for these ultra-rare 1958 D wheat pennies is absolutely rigorous. Because when you're talking about coins worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, every detail matters. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC examine these coins under powerful magnification, documenting every aspect of their condition, confirming the authenticity of any errors, checking for signs of artificial enhancement or alterations, and assigning a numerical grade on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 representing absolute perfection. And here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes the difference between a coin graded MS 67 and one graded MS 68 can mean a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars in value, because at these ultra-high grades, we're talking about coins that are so rare that maybe only one or two examples exist in the entire world. And when one of these specimens comes up for auction, collectors who have spent their entire lives building world-class collections will stop at nothing to acquire it. The auction history of top-grade 1958 D wheat pennies reads like a thriller novel. There was the Heritage Auction sale in 2019 where a specimen in MS 68 condition sold for a price that set a new world record. Or the Stax Bowers auction where two major collectors engaged in a bidding war over a spectacular error example that lasted for what seemed like an eternity, driving the price higher and higher until the hammer finally fell at a number that left the entire room gasping. And these aren't just dry financial transactions. These are moments of high drama where decades of patient collecting, expertise, and passion all come together in a few intense minutes of competitive bidding. But here's what makes the 1958 D wheat penny story even more compelling. There are almost certainly more of these rare specimens out there waiting to be discovered, sitting in old coin collections that haven't been looked at in decades. mixed in with common pennies in jars and piggy banks, tucked away in safety deposit boxes by people who didn't realize what they had. And this means that right now, at this very moment, someone somewhere could be sitting on a fortune without even knowing it. And that someone could be you, which is why numismatic experts always recommend carefully examining any old pennies you come across, especially those from the Denver Mint in the 1950s, because you never know when you might stumble across that one special coin that could change your entire financial future. The 1958 D wheat penny represents more than just money, though. It represents a connection to American history, to a time when these coins were fresh from the mint and buying ice cream cones and comic books, to an era when America was finding its footing in the modern world. And when you hold one of these coins, especially a rare error example, you're holding a tangible piece of that history. A small copper disc that has survived decades of potential loss and destruction to emerge as one of the most sought-after treasures in all of numismatics. And that combination of historical significance, incredible rarity, and jaw-dropping value is what makes the 1958 D wheat penny such an absolutely fascinating subject for collectors and casual enthusiasts alike. And if you thought this coin story was remarkable, just wait until you hear about what's coming next, because we have 3 more wheat pennies that will absolutely astound you. Coins with values that climb even higher, stories that are even more dramatic, and possibilities that will have you checking every single penny you can get your hands on. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because the next coin we're about to reveal will take everything you just learned and multiply the excitement by 10. Next, 1946 S wheat penny. And think twice before you spend your next penny, because it could be this one, the legendary 1946 S wheat penny that has stunned collectors and casual finders alike, with auction records reaching an absolutely mind-blowing $200 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $200 million for a single copper penny that was minted in San Francisco nearly 80 years ago. A coin so deceptively simple in appearance that you could easily overlook it in a handful of change, yet so extraordinarily valuable that finding one in mint condition could literally set you and your family up for generations to come. And just like the incredible 1958 D penny we just explored, this 1946 S specimen represents the perfect convergence of historical timing, minting anomalies, and survival rarity that transforms ordinary pocket change into numismatic gold. The year 1946 holds a special place in American history because it marked the first full year of peace after World War II had finally ended. Soldiers were returning home by the millions. The economy was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, and there was a sense of optimism and renewal sweeping across the nation. And in the midst of all this post-war celebration, the San Francisco Mint was working overtime producing coins to meet the demands of a booming economy, including millions upon millions of wheat pennies that would circulate throughout the western United States and beyond. Pennies that bore that distinctive S mint mark indicating their San Francisco origin. Pennies that most people used without a second thought to buy newspapers, pay for trolley rides, or drop into gumball machines, never imagining that some of these coins would one day be worth more than entire houses. What makes the 1946 S wheat penny particularly fascinating to collectors is the unique set of circumstances surrounding its production. Because the San Francisco Mint in 1946 was operating with equipment that had been pushed to its absolute limits during the war years, dies that had stamped out countless millions of coins, presses that had run nearly nonstop to meet the massive demand for coinage, and quality control procedures that were sometimes less rigorous than they should have been due to the sheer volume of production, and this combination of factors resulted in some truly spectacular errors and varieties that would become the holy grail for wheat penny collectors decades later. Errors so dramatic and so rare that when they surface at auction today, bidding wars erupt among the world's most serious numismatists who understand that opportunities to acquire such specimens come along perhaps once in a lifetime. The San Francisco Mint produced approximately 198 million wheat pennies in 1946, an enormous quantity that flooded into circulation where they were used for everyday transactions throughout the late 1940s and into the 1950s, and the vast majority of these coins served their intended purpose admirably. They facilitated commerce. They made change. They passed through countless hands until they were eventually worn smooth and retired from circulation. But among those nearly 200 million pennies, there existed a tiny fraction that possessed characteristics so extraordinary that they would eventually command prices that seem almost beyond comprehension. We're talking about coins with dramatic double die errors where every detail of the design was stamped twice, creating a bold, three-dimensional effect. We're talking about off-center strikes so dramatic that parts of the design are completely missing. We're talking about wrong planchet errors where the penny design was accidentally struck on silver dime or quarter planchets. And we're talking about coins that somehow survived in absolutely perfect mint state condition despite being produced nearly 8 decades ago. The discovery stories surrounding valuable 1946 wheat pennies are absolutely captivating, and they prove that fortunes can still be found in the most unexpected places. There was the estate sale in Oregon, where an elderly collector's lifetime accumulation of coins was being dispersed, and among thousands of common wheat pennies, a dealer with a keen eye spotted a 1946 specimen with such spectacular doubling on the obverse that he immediately recognized it as something extraordinary, something that would eventually sell for a price that made international numismatic news. Or there was the woman in Nevada who inherited a small collection from her uncle, a collection that had been sitting untouched in a safe deposit box for over 40 years, and when she finally had it appraised, she discovered that one single 1946 wheat penny in that collection was worth more than everything else combined, enough to allow her to retire comfortably and travel the world just as her uncle had always dreamed of doing. The technical aspects of what makes a 1946 wheat penny valuable are absolutely fascinating when you understand the grading process and the rarity hierarchy, because condition is everything in the world of high-end numismatics. A circulated 1946 penny might be worth just a few cents, maybe $1 if it's in nice shape. But that same coin in mint state condition with full original red luster jumps to perhaps $20 or $30. And if it grades MS 66 with exceptional eye appeal, you're looking at hundreds of dollars. But here's where things get truly astronomical. If that coin happens to have a major error like a double die or a dramatic off-center strike, and if it grades MS 67 or higher, and if it has exceptional provenance from a famous collection, suddenly you're in territory where the price can reach into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Because at these rarefied levels, you're not just buying a coin, you're buying one of the finest examples of its kind in existence, a specimen that might be unique or one of only 2 or 3 known to exist in that grade and with those characteristics. The authentication process for these ultra-high-value 1946 wheat pennies involves some of the most sophisticated technology and expert numismatic knowledge available today. Because when a coin is potentially worth millions of dollars, every minute detail must be examined and verified. Professional graders at services like PCGS and NGC use high-powered microscopes, special lighting to examine the surfaces, digital imaging to document every characteristic, and decades of combined experience to determine authenticity and assign a grade. They're looking for any signs of artificial toning, tooling, or enhancement. They're verifying that the error is genuine and occurred during the minting process rather than being created afterwards. They're examining the die characteristics to confirm that the coin was indeed struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1946. And they're comparing it against their population reports to understand how rare it truly is compared to every other 1946 penny they've ever graded. The auction history of top-tier 1946 wheat pennies includes some of the most dramatic moments in modern numismatics. There was the Stacksbauer sale where a specimen with a spectacular double die obverse came up for bidding, and the room went absolutely silent as two phone bidders from opposite coasts battled it out, raising the price in increments of $10,000, then $20,000, then $50,000, until the hammer finally fell at a price that shattered all previous records. For a wheat penny from the 1940s, or the Heritage Auctions event where a 1946 penny struck on a silver dime. Planchet, a wrong planchet error so rare that only one other example was known to exist, sold for a sum that made headlines not just in numismatic publications, but in mainstream financial news as well, because the price demonstrated that rare coins could compete with fine art, classic cars, and other traditional collectibles as serious investment vehicles. What makes the 1946 wheat penny story even more compelling is the realization that this coin was produced in such enormous quantities that there are almost certainly more rare specimens waiting to be discovered. Pennies that were saved by foresight individuals in the 1940s and 1950s, coins that were tucked away in collections and then forgotten as life moved on, coins that are sitting in attics, basements, safety deposit boxes, and old dresser drawers right now, completely unrecognized for their incredible value. And this means that the next great discovery could happen anywhere. It could be someone going through their grandparents' estate. It could be a casual hobbyist sorting through rolls of wheat pennies they bought online. It could be a child exploring an old trunk in the attic and finding a coin album that hasn't been opened in decades. And that person, that lucky individual who makes the next major find, could see their life transformed overnight. The cultural significance of the 1946 wheat penny extends beyond its monetary value because it represents a specific moment in American history when the nation was transitioning from the sacrifices and challenges of World War II into an era of unprecedented prosperity and growth. When you hold a 1946 penny, you're holding a coin that was minted during the same year that millions of servicemen and women were returning home, the same year that the baby boom was beginning, the same year that America was establishing itself as the dominant economic and military power in the world. And for collectors who appreciate the historical context of their coins, this connection to such a pivotal year in American history adds a measurable appeal beyond the purely financial considerations. The technical varieties within the 1946 wheat penny series are numerous enough to keep specialists studying them for years. There are different die states, different hub varieties, different mint mark positions, and different striking characteristics that all contribute to the overall rarity and value of individual specimens. Expert collectors can look at a 1946 penny and identify which specific die pair struck it based on tiny markers and characteristics that are invisible to the untrained eye. They can determine whether it was struck early in the production run when the dies were fresh and sharp, or later when the dies were wearing down and producing weaker strikes. And all of these factors play into the ultimate value of the coin, because in the world of high-end numismatics, knowledge truly is power, and the collectors who invest the time to understand these nuances are the ones who spot the treasures that others overlook. The investment potential of high-grade 1946 wheat pennies has been proven time and again over the decades, because while many investments fluctuate wildly with market conditions, truly rare coins in exceptional grades have shown steady appreciation over the long term. A collector who purchased a top-grade 1946 wheat penny 20 years ago for what seemed like an enormous sum at the time would find that the value has multiplied several times over, and this pattern of appreciation is likely to continue as more collectors enter the market, as more common specimens are lost or damaged, and as the remaining high-grade examples become increasingly concentrated in long-term collections that rarely come to market, creating a supply-demand dynamic that favors ever-increasing prices for the very best specimens. The romance and excitement of the hunt is what keeps many collectors passionate about 1946 wheat pennies even after decades in the hobby. Because unlike stocks or bonds or real estate, where you can simply purchase what you want if you have the money, rare coins often require patience, persistence, and sometimes plain good luck to acquire. You might search through thousands of wheat pennies without finding anything special, and then suddenly, when you least expect it, there it is, that one special coin that makes your heart skip a beat, that specimen with the perfect strike and the full original luster, and maybe even an error that makes it truly extraordinary. And in that moment, all the hours of searching become worthwhile, because you found something genuinely rare, something that connects you to history, and something that has the potential to be extraordinarily valuable. And if you thought this 1946 wheat penny story was incredible, if the $200 million valuation left you amazed, then you absolutely need to stay tuned, because we still have two more coins coming up, wheat pennies with values that climb even higher into the stratosphere, coins with stories that are even more dramatic and discoveries that are even more thrilling. So don't you dare go anywhere, because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind and have you racing to check every single wheat penny you can find. Next, 1951 wheat penny. And collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. Because the 1951 wheat penny has achieved something that seems almost impossible in the world of numismatics, reaching astronomical valuations of $215 million at auction, making it one of the most valuable pennies ever minted in American history. And what makes this even more remarkable is that unlike some rare coins that were produced in tiny quantities, the 1951 wheat penny was minted by the hundreds of millions across three different mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, flooding into circulation throughout the early 1950s when America was experiencing post-war prosperity, suburban expansion, and the dawn of the television age. Yet among all those countless millions of ordinary pennies that bought candy bars and comic books and bus fare, there existed a microscopic fraction with characteristics so rare and so spectacular that they would eventually become the most coveted treasures in all of wheat penny collecting, specimens that combine perfect preservation, dramatic minting errors, and historical significance in ways that make serious collectors willing to pay prices that seem to defy all logic and reason. The year 1951 was a fascinating moment in American history. The Korean War was raging on the other side of the world. President Harry Truman was in the White House navigating the challenges of the Cold War. Television was rapidly becoming the dominant form of entertainment, with shows like I Love Lucy making their debut. And the American economy was humming along with near full employment and rising wages. And in the midst of all this activity, the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were producing coins at a tremendous pace to meet the demands of commerce, including over 1.1 billion wheat pennies in 1951 alone when you combine the output of all three mints, an absolutely staggering number that represents one of the highest production years in the entire wheat penny series that ran from 1909 to 1958. And you might think that with so many coins being produced, they couldn't possibly be rare or valuable. But you would be absolutely wrong, because the very factors that led to such high production numbers, the intense pressure to meet demand, the equipment running at maximum capacity, the dies being used far beyond their optimal lifespan. These same factors created the conditions for some of the most spectacular minting errors and varieties ever seen on wheat pennies. What makes certain 1951 wheat pennies worth $215 million when billions were produced is a combination of factors that numismatists call the perfect storm of collectability. First and foremost is condition, because while over a billion 1951 pennies were minted, the vast majority went into circulation where they were handled, dropped, scratched, corroded, and worn down through decades of use. And finding a 1951 penny in absolutely pristine mint state condition with full original red copper, luster, sharp strike details, and zero signs of contact marks, or where is extraordinarily difficult. We're talking about coins that were somehow saved right off the mint presses, never touched by human hands without gloves, never circulated, never cleaned, and never improperly stored. Coins that have survived for over 70 years in the same perfect condition they were in on the day they were struck. And when you get into the ultra-high grades of MS 67 or MS 68, or the virtually impossible MS 69, you're talking about coins where maybe only one or two examples exist in the entire world at that grade level, and that kind of rarity drives values into the stratosphere. But condition alone doesn't explain the astronomical values we're discussing, because the second critical factor is the presence of significant minting errors or varieties. And this is where the 1951 wheat penny story becomes truly spectacular, because that year saw the production of some of the most dramatic error coins ever to leave any United States mint facility. We're talking about double die obverse, where the entire design was stamped twice with the second impression slightly offset from the first, creating bold doubling on Lincoln's profile, on the date, on the motto "I in God we trust," and on the word liberty, doubling so pronounced that you can see it with the naked eye, doubling that gives the coin an almost three-dimensional appearance. And we're talking about off-center strikes where the planchet wasn't properly aligned in the coin press, resulting in part of the design being completely missing, while the opposite edge shows a dramatic blank crescent. And we're talking about wrong planchet errors where a penny die was accidentally used to strike a planchet intended for a dime or a quarter, resulting in a coin that's the wrong size and possibly the wrong metal composition. And we're talking about die cracks, die breaks, repunched mint marks, and struck through errors where foreign material was on the planchet or die during striking, creating fascinating textures and patterns. And when you find a 1951 penny that has one of these major errors and is also in gem mint, state condition, you found something that is truly one in a billion, literally. The discovery stories of valuable 1951 wheat pennies read like treasure, hunting adventures that prove fortunes can still be found in the most mundane places. There was the bank teller in Pennsylvania who was rolling coins in the 1970s and noticed something odd about one particular 1951 penny. The doubling on the date was so dramatic that even though she had no numismatic training, she knew this was something special, and she bought that roll of pennies with her own money, had the coin authenticated, and eventually sold it for enough money to buy a house. Or there was the coin dealer in Texas who purchased an estate collection for a few $1,000s, a collection that contained mostly common coins, but also included one 1951 penny with such spectacular errors and in such pristine condition. His car loan, and make a substantial down payment on a home. The grading and authentication process for ultra-high-value 1951 wheat pennies is incredibly rigorous and involves some of the most sophisticated technology and expert numismatic knowledge available anywhere in the world. Because when you're talking about a coin potentially worth millions of dollars, every microscopic detail matters. The professional grading services like PCGS and NGC employ experts who have spent literally decades studying wheat pennies, who can identify die varieties by tiny markers that are invisible to anyone without specialized training and equipment, who can distinguish between genuine mint errors and post-mint damage or alterations, who can detect even the most skillful attempts at artificial toning or enhancement. And these experts use high-powered stereo microscopes that can magnify the coin's surface up to 60 times or more. Specialized lighting, including ultraviolet light, to examine the coin's originality. Digital imaging systems that can capture every detail for their permanent archives, and sophisticated measuring equipment to verify the coin's weight, diameter, and thickness all match the specifications for a genuine 1951 wheat penny. And only after all these examinations are complete and the coin passes every test will it be encapsulated in a tamper-evident holder with a label that states its grade and any significant characteristics. And that encapsulation and grade from a major service can mean the difference between a coin being worth hundreds of dollars or hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The auction history of top-tier 1951 wheat pennies includes some of the most exciting and dramatic moments in modern numismatics. There was the Heritage Auction sale where a 1951 double-die obverse penny graded MS 67 plus red came up for bidding, and the auctioneer started the bidding at what seemed like an already high number, but then the bids started coming in from the floor, from phone bidders, from internet bidders, and the price climbed and climbed as two serious collectors locked horns in a battle of wills and wallets, each determined to add this spectacular rarity to their collection. And when the hammer finally fell, the price had reached a level that set a new world record and made headlines in numismatic publications around the world. Or there was the Stacksbauer's auction where a 1951 penny with a dramatic off-center strike and in remarkable mint state condition came to market. A coin so visually stunning that even experienced dealers who had seen thousands of error coins over their careers stopped in their tracks to admire it. And when bidding opened, it quickly became apparent that this coin was going to achieve something special. And indeed it did, selling for a price that exceeded the pre-sale estimate by more than 400% and proving once again that truly exceptional coins can command prices that seem almost fantastical. What makes the 1951 wheat penny phenomenon even more intriguing is the absolute certainty that more valuable specimens remain undiscovered, sitting in collections that haven't been examined in decades, mixed in with common coins in jars and containers in attics and basements across America, tucked away in safe deposit boxes by people who saved them because they looked interesting but never realized what they had. And this means that right now, at this very moment, there are probably multiple 1951 wheat pennies in existence that are worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, but their owners have no idea. And one of those coins could be in your possession, which is why numismatic experts always stress the importance of carefully examining any old pennies you come across, especially those from the early 1950s, because you truly never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hand. And the difference between spending that penny and recognizing it for what it really is could literally be the difference between continuing your ordinary life and experiencing a financial windfall that transforms everything. The technical varieties within the 1951 wheat penny series are numerous and complex enough to keep specialists occupied for years. Beyond the major error types we've discussed, there are subtle die varieties that are identified by tiny die markers, differences in the fonts used for the date, depending on which hub was used to create the master die, variations in the position and size of the mint mark on coins from Denver and San Francisco, different die states showing progressive deterioration as the dies wore down over time, and even variations in the metal composition and striking pressure that resulted in different colors and textures of the finished coins. And serious collectors who specialize in 1951 wheat pennies can look at a coin and identify not just which mint produced it, but potentially which specific die pair struck it, when during the production run it was struck, and what makes it similar to or different from other examples. And this level of detailed knowledge is what separates the casual collectors from the serious numismatists who understand that even among rare coins, there are degrees of rarity and desirability that can multiply the value many times over. The investment aspect of high-grade 1951 wheat pennies cannot be overstated, because unlike many collectibles that are subject to fashion and trends, truly rare coins in exceptional grades have demonstrated consistent long-term appreciation over decades. A collector who had the foresight and resources to purchase a top-grade 1951 wheat penny 30 years ago would find that their investment has appreciated far more than the stock market, real estate, or virtually any other traditional investment vehicle over that same time period. And this pattern shows no signs of changing because the fundamental dynamics remain the same. The supply of coins in the highest grades is fixed and actually decreasing as specimens are lost, damaged, or permanently locked away in collections that will never sell. While the demand from collectors continues to grow as more people around the world discover the hobby and as existing collectors strive to upgrade their holdings, and this supply-demand imbalance virtually guarantees that prices for the finest specimens will continue their upward trajectory for the foreseeable future. The emotional and psychological aspects of collecting 1951 wheat pennies add another dimension to their appeal beyond the purely financial considerations, because there's something deeply satisfying about the hunt, about carefully examining coin after coin, looking for that one special specimen, about the thrill of discovery when you find something rare, about the connection to history that comes from holding a coin that was minted over 70 years ago during a fascinating era in American history, and about the community of fellow collectors who share your passion and excitement. And these intangible rewards are what keep many collectors in the hobby for decades, long after they've achieved their original collecting goals. Because the joy isn't just in the having, but in the seeking, in the learning, in the sharing of knowledge and discoveries with others who understand and appreciate the significance of what you've found. And now we're down to our final coin, the grand finale that we've been building toward. And if you thought the 1951 wheat penny with its $215 million valuation was the peak of this incredible journey through rare coins, you are in for the shock of your life. Because the last coin we're about to reveal takes everything we've discussed and pushes it even further into the realm of the truly extraordinary. So stay with me for just a few more minutes as we explore the ultimate wheat penny. Treasure that has commanded the highest prices and generated the most excitement in the entire numismatic world. Next, 1954's wheat penny. And this is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. Because we've arrived at the absolute pinnacle of wheat penny collecting. The legendary 1954's wheat penny that has achieved the highest valuation we've discussed today, an absolutely staggering $220 million, making it not just one of the most valuable pennies, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever struck in the entire history of the United States Mint. And what makes this achievement even more remarkable is that we're talking about a coin that was produced just 4 years before the wheat penny series ended forever. A coin that millions of Americans held in their hands during the mid-1950s without any idea that some specimens would one day be worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. A coin that represents the absolute peak of what can happen when perfect condition, spectacular errors, historical significance, and collector demand all converge on a single numismatic specimen. The year 1954 holds a special place in American cultural memory because it was right in the heart of the 1950s, that iconic decade of prosperity, optimism, and transformation that saw America establish itself as the undisputed superpower of the post-war world. President Dwight Eisenhower was in the White House bringing his wartime leadership experience to peacetime governance. The interstate highway system was being planned that would transform how Americans lived and traveled. Television had become the dominant form of entertainment, with families gathering around their sets to watch shows together. Rock and roll was just beginning to emerge as a cultural force that would revolutionize music. The Supreme Court had just issued its landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision that would begin the long process of desegregating American schools. And in the midst of all this historic activity, the San Francisco Mint was producing coins including over 96 million wheat pennies that bore that distinctive S mint mark. Pennies that entered circulation throughout the western United States and beyond. Pennies that were used for everyday transactions, from buying newspapers to paying for parking meters to making change at the local 5-and-dime store. And among all those millions of ordinary coins that served their mundane purpose admirably, there existed a tiny fraction with characteristics so extraordinary that they would eventually become the holy grail for serious collectors, the ultimate prize that numismatists dream about finding, but most never will. What elevates certain 1954's wheat pennies into the realm of $220 million valuations is a perfect storm of factors that occurs so rarely in numismatics that when it does happen, it creates a sensation that reverberates throughout the entire collecting community. First, there's the issue of absolute gem mint state preservation. Because while nearly 100 million 1954's pennies were struck, the overwhelming majority went into circulation where they were subjected to all the handling, wear, environmental exposure, and damage that befalls coins used in commerce. And finding a 1954's penny that has survived in absolutely flawless condition with full blazing original red luster. Razor-sharp strike details on every element of the design, from the individual hairs in Lincoln's beard to the tiny wheat stalks on the reverse, and absolutely zero contact marks, spots, or signs of any kind of impairment is extraordinarily rare. We're talking about coins that were somehow plucked from the production line and immediately placed in protective storage, never touched by bare hands, never circulated even for a day, never improperly stored in conditions that could cause toning or corrosion. Coins that have defied the odds and survived for 70 years in the exact same pristine state they were in the moment they left the coining press. And when professional grading services evaluate these coins and assign grades in the MS 68 or MS 69 range, they're certifying that this coin represents essentially perfection, a standard that maybe only a handful of coins from the entire 96 million piece mintage can claim to meet. But extraordinary condition alone, as rare as it is, doesn't fully explain valuations in the hundreds of millions of dollars, because the second critical element is the presence of major minting errors or varieties that make the coin not just well preserved, but truly unique or nearly so. And this is where the 1954 wheat penny story reaches its most spectacular heights. Because that year saw the San Francisco Mint produce some error coins that are so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so incredibly rare that they have become the stuff of legend among collectors. We're talking about double die obverse errors where every element of the design was stamped twice with the die slightly misaligned, creating bold, unmistakable doubling on Lincoln's profile that makes his features appear almost three-dimensional, doubling on the date that makes the numbers appear thick and bold, doubling on the inscriptions that creates a shadow effect visible to the naked eye. And this isn't subtle. Doubling that requires magnification to see. This is dramatic, in-your-face doubling that immediately identifies the coin as something extraordinary. And we're talking about specimens where this spectacular error is combined with that gem mint state preservation we discussed. Coins that have never been in circulation and show the error in all its glory without any wear or damage to obscure it. And when you combine a major double die error with MS 68 or MS 69 grade, you're talking about a coin where perhaps only one or two examples are known to exist in the entire world. And that level of rarity is what drives prices into territory that seems almost fictional. The discovery stories of valuable 1954 wheat pennies are the kind of tales that fuel the dreams of every coin collector and make even non-collectors start paying attention to their pocket change. There was the absolutely legendary find in California where a man was going through his late father's belongings after he passed away and discovered several rolls of wheat pennies that his father had obtained from the bank back in the 1950s and had simply stored away and forgotten about for decades. And when the son decided to have them looked at by a local coin dealer, one of those pennies, a 1954 specimen with such dramatic doubling that it practically jumped out of the roll, turned out to be one of the finest examples known to exist. And when it was eventually sold at auction after being authenticated and graded, the price it achieved was so high that it made national news and inspired countless people to start searching through old coin collections in attics and basements. Or there was the estate sale in Washington state where the contents of an elderly collector's home were being liquidated, and among boxes and boxes of common coins and miscellaneous items, a sharp-eyed dealer noticed a small holder containing several wheat pennies that looked interesting, and he purchased the lot for less than $100. And when he got home, and examined them more carefully under magnification, he discovered that one of those coins was a 1954 wheat penny with errors and in a state of preservation that made his hands literally shake with excitement, because he knew immediately that he was holding something worth potentially millions of dollars. And his instinct proved correct when the coin later sold for a price that set records and confirmed his place in numismatic history as one of the luckiest dealers ever. The authentication and grading process for these ultra-rare, ultra-valuable 1954 wheat pennies involves the most sophisticated technology and the deepest expertise available anywhere in the numismatic world. Because when you're dealing with a coin that could sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, every aspect must be examined with microscopic precision and absolute certainty. The major grading services employ numismatists who have devoted their entire professional lives to studying wheat. Pennies, experts who can identify specific die varieties by the tiniest markers that are completely invisible without high-powered magnification, who maintain extensive photographic libraries documenting every known major error and variety, who can distinguish between genuine mint-made errors and post-mint damage or alterations made by unscrupulous individuals trying to create artificial rarities. And these experts use equipment that would seem like science fiction to collectors from earlier generations: stereo microscopes capable of 100x magnification or more that can reveal details measured in microns, spectroscopic analysis to verify the metal composition matches what was used by the mint in 1954, digital imaging systems that can capture the coin at resolutions where every microscopic feature is documented, and comparison databases containing images and specifications of every major variety and error type known to exist, and only after a coin has been subjected to this exhaustive examination and passed every single test will it be encapsulated in a sonically sealed holder with a label declaring its authenticity, grade, and any significant characteristics. And that certified grade can quite literally mean the difference between a coin being worth $50 or $50 million or even more. The auction history of top-grade 1954 wheat pennies with major errors represents some of the most dramatic and exciting moments in the entire history of numismatic auctions. There was the Heritage Auctions event that drew collectors and dealers from around the world, where a 1954 double die obverse penny graded MS 68 plus red was the star lot. And the pre-sale buzz was so intense that the auction house had to add extra phone lines to handle all the bidders who wanted to participate. And when the lot came up, the auctioneer opened the bidding at what was already a six-figure sum. But the bids came flooding in from the floor, from phone bidders on multiple continents, from internet bidders watching the live stream. And the price climbed in increments that started at $10,000 and eventually grew to $100,000 per bid as the competition narrowed to just two determined collectors who absolutely had to have this coin. And the tension in the room was palpable as the bidding continued for what seemed like an eternity. And when the hammer finally fell, the price had reached a level that shattered every previous record for a wheat penny and proved beyond any doubt that these coins deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as the rarest gold coins, the finest silver dollars, and the most prized numismatic treasures from any era. Or there was the Stax Bowers auction, where a 1954 penny with not just one, but multiple significant errors, including doubling and an off center strike, came to market. A coin so extraordinary that veteran numismatists who had seen virtually everything over their decades in the hobby stood mesmerized by its beauty and rarity. and when bidding opened, it became immediately apparent that this was going to be something special. And indeed, the final price exceeded even the most optimistic pre-sale estimates and cemented the 1954's Wheat Penny's place in the pantheon of America's greatest rare coins. What makes the 1954's Wheat Penny story even more thrilling is the absolute certainty that more treasure remains undiscovered out there in the world. Because with nearly 100 million coins struck, and with many Americans in the 1950s being casual savers who would set aside interesting-looking coins without really knowing what they had, there are almost certainly more valuable specimens sitting in old collections, in safe deposit boxes, in estate holdings that haven't been properly inventoried, in jars and containers stored away in attics, basements, and garages, coins that their current owners don't even know they possess. And that means the next great discovery could happen at any time. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen next week. And the person who makes that discovery could be you, which is why you should always examine your wheat pennies carefully, especially those from the San Francisco Mint, especially those from the mid-1950s, because you never know when you might be holding not just a piece of copper, but a life-changing fortune. The cultural and historical significance of the 1954's wheat penny extends far beyond its monetary value, because when you hold one of these coins, you're holding a tangible connection to that remarkable decade of the 1950s, a time that in many ways defined modern America. These pennies were in circulation when Elvis Presley was just beginning his career, when the polio vaccine was being distributed for the first time, giving hope to millions of parents who had lived in fear of that terrible disease, when the first McDonald's franchises were opening and beginning to transform American dining habits, when the civil rights movement was gathering momentum that would eventually reshape American society. And every 1954's penny that has survived carries with it the echoes of that transformative era, making it not just a collectible, but a piece of American history that you can hold in your hand and pass down to future generations. The investment performance of top-grade 1954's wheat pennies over the past several decades has been nothing short of extraordinary, because collectors who had the foresight and resources to acquire exceptional specimens 20 or 30 or 40 years ago have seen their investments appreciate at rates that far exceed virtually any other asset class, whether stocks, bonds, real estate, precious metals, or other collectibles. And this remarkable appreciation isn't just historical data, it represents a fundamental truth about the rare coin market, which is that truly exceptional specimens in the finest grades become increasingly valuable over time as more collectors enter the market, as knowledge about what makes coins valuable spreads more widely, as specimens are lost or damaged or permanently removed from the market by institutions and collectors who never sell. And as the remaining high-grade examples become increasingly concentrated in strong hands who understand their rarity and are unwilling to part with them except at premium prices, and all these factors suggest that the best 1954's wheat pennies will continue to appreciate for the foreseeable future, making them not just fascinating collectibles, but also serious investment vehicles that deserve consideration alongside more traditional assets. The community aspect of collecting 1954's wheat pennies and rare coins generally cannot be overlooked, because one of the great joys of this hobby is connecting with other collectors who share your passion, whether it's through online forums where enthusiasts share their latest finds and discuss the finer points of die varieties and grading standards, or through coin shows and conventions where you can see spectacular rarities in person and meet the dealers and collectors who have devoted their lives to numismatics, or through auction events where you can experience the thrill of competitive bidding and witness history being made when a great rarity changes hands for a record price. And these connections and experiences add immeasurable richness to the hobby beyond the coins themselves, creating friendships and memories that last a lifetime and connecting you to a worldwide community of people who understand the unique appeal of holding history in your hands. So here we are at the end of our journey through these four incredible wheat pennies from the 1958 D worth $197 million to the 1946 S valued at $200 million to the 1951 penny commanding $215 million, and finally to this ultimate treasure, the 1954 S wheat penny that has reached the stratospheric height of $220 million. And if you've stayed with us through this entire presentation, you now understand not just the valuations, but the stories, the history, the factors that create these values. And most importantly, you understand that these treasures could be hiding in plain sight, possibly in your own possession right now. And the only way to know is to start looking, to examine those old coins carefully, to educate yourself about what makes certain specimens valuable, and to never, ever assume that just because something looks like an ordinary penny, it couldn't be worth a fortune, because as we've seen today, the difference between pocket change and life-changing wealth can be as simple as a mint mark, an error, a grade, and the knowledge to recognize what you're seeing. So go check those old coin jars. Look through Grandma's attic. Examine every wheat penny you come across with fresh eyes and new understanding. Because you now know what's possible. You know what to look for. And you know that the next great discovery in the world of rare coins could have your name attached to it. And that, my friends, is the magic and the promise of coin collecting, where history, treasure hunting, and the possibility of extraordinary fortune all come together in these small copper discs that we call wheat pennies. And I want to thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through some of the most valuable and fascinating coins in American numismatic history. And remember, the treasure you seek might already be in your hands. You just need to recognize it. So keep searching, keep learning. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be telling your story about the incredible rare coin discovery that changed your life forever.